Okay, great. So hopefully everybody can hear us. We're about to get started. In the first part of this webinar today, we're just going to go through a few slides to begin with to kind of give some history on TrainingPros, what we are, what we do, and what our relationship with Harrisburg University is. So as you can see, TrainingPros is a highly specialized staffing company that works specifically in the learning and development realm. Three major differences that set us apart from our competition is, of course, our relationship managers, like myself in Northwest Arkansas, as well as other markets spread throughout the U.S. A talent pool of loyal and very, very talented consultants that we manage, we're very proud of, and then proven onboarding for success methodology. We really try to place you with the right consultant the first time. And if you'd like to find out any more about what we are for the TrainingPros, you're more than welcome to go out and visit our website. There's lots of information to share. A little bit about myself. Obviously, like I mentioned, I'm from Northwest Arkansas. Majority of my career has been with Walmart, both as a manager with them and then a consultant. In later years, I've been a consultant outside of the Walmart company for about 10 years now. Trusted consultant. I've worked with a lot of the different corporations over there and a lot of the different departments, including international, .com, merchandising, logistics, and a lot of the manufacturing pieces overseas as well to make sure that they run as efficiently as they can. A little bit of the expertise in my background, a lot of web technology, a lot of e-learning. I have a fine art degree and a design degree as well, so that artwork and that design piece was always there for me. Lend itself very well to jumping right in and building e-learning programming for them, custom software apps, and things that really took web code, HTML, and JavaScript and really added to that e-learning piece to give them some capability that Captivate and Lectorian and some of those other softwares would not necessarily allow within those shells. A few things that TrainingPros can offer. Of course, instructional design and development, organizational development. We place facilitators as well, change management for your business, training coordination and planning, certainly e-learning and m-learning development, mobile apps, things along that nature, smartphones, tablets, touchscreen, technical communications, SOPs, job aids, things along those lines. Project management as well, if you ever need help with that project. And then editing and copywriting to make sure that your content turns out correct for your project. And like I said, our partnership with Harrisburg University has been very beneficial to us. It gives people like me a chance to get out and speak our minds and really give you guys some great insight of what we've been up to. And at any point during this webinar today, if you have any questions, certainly get them entered in the chat box below at the bottom of the screen. Justin, our team member at Harrisburg, will definitely type those up, and we will answer those questions in about the last 10 minutes of the webinar today. We'll make some time for everyone. Okay, Justin, I'm ready for the next slide. All right, so the topic for today's webinar is adding ROI to training using audio and digital media technology. And this is going to be a little bit different than the webinars in the past because there's two of us today. Not only do I have the benefit of being a relationship manager with Walmart, but I'm also a consultant for them still through TrainingPros. So I get a lot of insight from both sides of the table. It really gives me a great perspective. My partner today is Sissy Siero with Sissy Siero Voiceover and Digital Media. She's worked on a number of projects for me with Walmart for a number of years now, hundreds of projects to be honest, with VO and translation work and a lot of other things. So she's a great help, and I'm happy to have her on the call today as well. So a little bit about this session, what we'll learn today. We all know, how important training is. We know that businesses need training, but it's tough to put ROI on training sometimes. We know we need it, especially leadership training and things like that sometimes aren't tangible for years down the road. It's tough to put numbers on that. So in this webinar today, you'll learn how to better assess these things, what to look for prior to the project, possibly questions to ask your client prior to the project beginning. Sissy is going to come in and she's going to walk you through the workflow of these VO projects, how to do them correctly, the questions to ask, the edit and review process, and some things like that that will really give you a good idea of how to be successful on projects such as these. A few things that we're going to discuss. We've broken this down into chapters today. So there's 5 total chapters. The first chapter being how to identify the training projects with the best potential for ROI. Second chapter being the available options and success indicators for these ROI-based projects, some things to look for to start with. How to correctly plan for VO audio, translations, and digital media. That piece will be presented by Sissy herself. And then I'll wrap up the webinar with how to create and manage reliable ROI-based training technology to help you trigger and deliver this VO and these translation files. And then to wrap up, how to create an ROI discussion, a follow-up plan for your clients to make sure that you grow your business and the project's more successful down the road. There's always things we can learn no matter how good a project turns out. So the first chapter we'll start with is how to identify these training projects that have the best potential for ROI. And based on my experience with Walmart, ROI is a big thing for them. They're always looking for the best price. This is a very, very competitive industry, as you well know. So we've really tried to cater to them and really pick projects that had an ROI base that we could prove on down the road, making us a trusted partner with them, and we get more business out of it in the long run. The first thing we want to talk about as far as focus on that goes for identifying these ROI-based projects is sales growth. A few pieces of that is it could be employee training. It could be manufacturer training on the fulfillment side and the product development side. It could be marketing support to make sure you're getting the most out of your sales and that things are being done correctly in the field. The second area would be reduction of loss, of course, which that could be theft. It could be damaged merchandise in the stores or in the field. The third being reduction of costs and overhead, which would be payroll and employee time worked. Operating costs and overall efficiency would really fall within that bullet. And then below that, efficiency improvement when it comes to logistics, liquidation, and technology-based initiatives for the officer field. This could include .com, these days social media as well, to make sure these things are being done in a way that they're not only being done correctly, but they're focused on an ROI target, right, an achievable target for us. And obviously we've all heard of these with different businesses, and this isn't new information, but it's all in how we look at these and how we're going to use them today to add indicators to know which of these options to focus on as we move through projects. So here's a few of the available options, and some of these we'll talk about later on in the presentation, whether it be during Sissy's piece or during the wrap-up discussion at the end. I'll deep dive into some of these things. And then after this webinar today, if you have any additional questions, definitely reach out. I'm happy to answer those questions via email or phone if you'd like to set up a phone call as well. We're happy to help. So the first one being, LMS-based platforms, which we're all familiar with. That's learning management systems. Whether being in-house within the confines of your system within your company or online via a third party. Seems like a lot of people these days are going to third-party providers for not only the cost effectiveness, but that's really what these people do, and it saves time from having to create an LMS in-house from scratch or to manage that piece. It can be very tedious. But LMS, platforms can definitely track user data and completion data for e-learnings and other things they host. It doesn't have to be an e-learning. It could be a job aid. Just to see views, how many people view that, when they picked it up, when they pulled it down and downloaded it. It can send real-time reports to your clients, which is always handy. And LMS-based platforms, they work well with Captivate, Lectora, and some of the e-learning software such as Storyline that we're familiar with. So obviously that's a no-brainer there. But we're going to set that to the side, and we're going to kind of move on to e-learning. And obviously we're familiar with that as well. It's been around for quite some time. I've been doing it myself for around 10 years. So let's take some e-learning modules to the next level by adding some things like additional script functions and things that are outside that e-learning that can add some functionality that maybe Storyline can't add without significant development time on that piece. But we'll talk about that in Chapter 4, that's outlined, like I said, later on in the webinar. So number 3 would be interactive video training. And that's really something that Sissy will be able to speak towards as far as some of the case studies we've had with Walmart and with other businesses and some of the success stories that we've came across and some of the opportunities as well. So she'll be able to fill you in on that. The 4th piece being, review the results in person with your clients at the end of the project, no matter what it is, whether it be good or bad. There's always room to improve, is how we look at it. And it's really a great way to sit down and gain additional trust with your clientele. And keep that relationship moving on down the road. Possibly get more work, but certainly to make sure that that project in the long term is going to be successful. And we don't want to ever just walk away from anything like that. Okay, we're going to be moving on to Chapter 2 now. So some of the available options and the success indicators, as I like to call it, for ROI-based training projects. There'll be several business scenarios, as I've mentioned, that Sissy will discuss later in Chapter 3. There are a few options for reliable ROI-based training that will be discussed in Chapter 4 as well. So we'll deep dive into that. But here's a few things to keep in mind before we see some of these case studies. It helps me to try to measure my initial training ROI when I'm dreaming these things up with my clients during our first meetings, to try to put these things into percentage form. A lot of times the client doesn't have solid data or solid figures, fiscal figures to go by. They have an idea, but they don't necessarily know what those milestones will be, what the specific goals might be. So using percentages is a good way for us to gauge how successful we might be able to be in terms of ROI with that project without having to do too much work, without having to go too far down the road in development. So identify attainable goals, also, and ensure that the client knows what the possible thresholds of success might be. Attainable goals are one thing, but we need to know how good is good, how good is great. How much is unattainable? That way we don't get their hopes up. We work well within the constraints of something that we can accomplish and be successful at, and we always want to do that. So some of these attainable goals, like we mentioned, might be improved retention. I know with Walmart, with other Fortune 500 retail companies, the first 30 days of employment is crucial because they have a lot of turnover, whether it be that person was a fit for that job or that management position. Possibly the training wasn't adequate and they didn't feel at home their first week on the job and they decided to go somewhere else. So, to be able to save the invested dollars into that employee, retention is a big thing as far as ROI goes on these projects. But sometimes it's not tracked, for sure. I know with Walmart that's been the case. So the second part being sales and growth milestones, obviously. And that's something, like I said, we can start with percentages and we can kind of dial those down as we work through those pieces with our clients. Improve morale is a big thing. That certainly affects the productivity of the workplace, your employee efficiency, attendance, things like that. Morale is a big thing. That's certainly something that can definitely affect ROI in the long run. Improve leadership and management skills is always good. Leadership skills and leadership training is great, but these leaders need to be aware of how that affects return on investment as well, so they have some accountability in that regard. Data collection from customers or employees to increase sales. That's really, that's a big point for me with Walmart. That allows me to tell the story correctly with them during the project and at the end, so we can make sure that our milestones and our goals are achievable. And then social media and online viral marketing. Product rollouts, it could be for sweepstakes, it could be for giveaways, it could be to support a charity, right? For the holidays or something like that. But it's a great way to drive perspectives and rollouts depending on what you'd like to do. And social media is a big platform. With training, some people don't make that connection, but that technology is out there, so my suggestion would be to use it instead of having to reinvent the wheel. So at this point, with Chapter 3, I'm going to go over and hand my piece over to Sissy Siero with Sissy Siero Voiceover and Digital Media, and she will take it from here. Sissy?
Hey, thanks, Alan. And thank you, everybody, for being here. We really appreciate your attendance. And we've got some great experience to share with you. I always think the best experience to share is the ones that where we've made mistakes and where we've triumphed. So there's a bit of each in what I'm going to share with you about the next chapter. Starting my career as an entertainer gave me insights to better connect with a wide-ranging audience. And coming from a diverse business background gives me a unique perspective on the use of audio and other digital media in training. I'm often asked to explain the various digital media products we offer and to help determine which product and production design would be the most beneficial and targeted to support specific training goals. And supporting our clients' goals is really at the heart of what Alan and I are sharing with you today and why we're sharing with you. As we've been exploring, ROI is a science. It's a tool and a guidepost to assure that critical information is delivered in an efficient and trackable way. The creative process in determining how to assess when a training product is achieving ROI rather, is largely based on a client's priorities. Is it clicks, views, downloads? Is it measurable in sales increase and talent retention? So it's really my goal to kind of shed light on all this and kind of help you figure out what would be the most impactful and powerful way of utilizing digital media. To do the one thing is to understand how to leverage that to get the most of your budget spent. So I'm going to start with 3 different areas that my company focuses on and what we usually purvey to TrainingPros clients. We're going to start with Voiceover. That's my main thing, and I love it, and I know so much about how to leverage this that I'm going to start with that. Here we go. So 2 of the most important identifying facts and questions that we use to assess the criteria for planning for the voiceover are audience demographic. You've got to know who you're speaking to. Who are you training in the company? I mean, it might seem obvious, but it's so important to ask these questions. Are they sales teams, manufacturing personnel, HR, customer service representatives, management, etc.? This answer determines explicit casting of talent, voice age, and gender. You might not think of those things specifically. You might think, oh, I'd like a guy or I'd like a woman, but it's really kind of important to understand who you're targeting before we make those decisions. Okay, and the next thing is informs the plan for production. So the whole thing about pacing and tone of narration is so important. How many times have you listened to things and you're just either bored or they're talking so darn fast you can't tell what they're saying? So it's really important to target that specifically. The second thing is, what is the purpose? Will this audio need to have longevity across several business cycles? Or will it be replaced or segments of it updated yearly as the company or the product or the services expand and change? Training is for an industry and/or a product that necessitates updates biannually at the minimum. So that's a really big one because we have to know, are you thinking every year I've got my core products that are not going to change, so we can do that voiceover for that. But there's something that is constantly updating to, keep it more current, as with like medical devices. Very, very important to understand that, because if we're going to be updating audio, we sure don't want to have to throw everything out. We want to be able to cut into that audio and save you the most money. Audio will be used in the primary e-learning and also repurposed in shorter segments in mobile support videos. That's a great point right there, because this is a way it can be repurposed. And that is part of ROI as far as I'm concerned. We want to repurpose things as much as we possibly can. I think it's a very important part. And we think about that. I like to think about all parts of it for my clients. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to talk about is translation. This is kind of a biggie. I think it's a quandary to a lot of people when I speak with them about it. And it took me a couple of years to really understand how to wield it as the right tool for my clients in the best possible way. And I've learned lots of hard knock lessons, and I'm going to share a few with you. 2 of the most important identifying factors and questions to assess the criteria would be usage, purpose, industry and product, and audience that will minimize training spend, to accomplish this. So we want to develop the courses first in English. That seems like a no-brainer, but sometimes, it's good to be really clear about these steps. Using a software that's easily allows for downloading and uploading of content to minimize redesign. And we recommend Storyline. It's just, I know a lot of you are probably well acquainted with Storyline. It's just the best. Their recent years they've made it so much easier on all of us, and it's a much more streamlined, efficient process. We want to organize all the source files. Again, it seems like a no-brainer, but you'd be surprised how many people wind up scrambling to find the logo files, to find the graphics, the original photos, original artwork. This really makes a difference because we're going to be changing the language on each piece of these things, making them available immediately upon translation kickoff. Can I say immediately one more time? If not faster. Okay. 3, identify dedicated SME for the lingual review. Now, that's another really important one because SMEs, they have to be available for timely review cycles. And, that's a hard one because we're asking folks who are already tasked with so many different things, but we need them to make sure that this is a priority. Best practices must be adhered to. Content lock is a big one. No change. Reviewing for, industry-specific terms correctly translated is really all the SMEs should be doing. It's costly and time-consuming to allow SMEs to interject any personal idiom and colloquial preferences, because that really changes the content, and then we have to put it all the way back through the process, and you can just imagine how costly that can get. Collaborate with the translation partner company to develop a realistic, timely completion. If the SMEs are in country, not in the US, time zones, national holidays, personal time, vacations, holidays, family needs, it all impacts production timeline and must be factored into the plan. Several factors can affect that. And I've run into that many times, not knowing that France has a certain holiday on a day that, Italy has decided that they have to protest in the street can really cause a problem. You'd be surprised. All right, let me click forward. Now we're going to get into digital media. It's pretty much, it's a similar way to ascertain what you need as kind of, with audio. It's a different component, but since it's a visual, mostly it's a visual, more of an entertaining factor. It's kind of similar to what we do with audio. So you have to identify the learner demographic again, determine who's being trained in a company. Because we're targeting a younger workforce for optimal content retention, well, that requires more entertaining and engaging digital media delivery. And then that determines the medium used. Are we using whiteboard video, animated video, motion graphic, live action video, stock or original photos and graphics, traditional e-learning development with interactions? So that's pretty self-explanatory, but I'll get a little further into that as we're talking. Using those videos and segments within traditional e-learning is a really great way to utilize it too, and to get kind of a double bang for the same buck. This also informs the plan for production. Shorter trainings, mobile learnings, modular usage segments where they're being repurposed, and that's kind of what I just touched on, and we'll talk about that some more. And then the purpose. Determining usages and the goals for the digital media will define production, cost, and budget timelines. Training is for an industry and/or product that necessitates updates biannually at the minimum. So this is a great way to think of the modular usage of digital media, because if certain parts of it have to be updated, but not all of it, that way we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater again. We can use that video that the company spent, who knows how much on, and repurpose it. And we just have to kind of tweak around it and or update the e-learning, the part that might be a lot less expensive to do. Will the digital media content drive the training or be part of the design? So when I say drive the training, I guess that means if we're going to use again, a whiteboard video and say it's 2 to 3 minutes, well, that might be the entire training. Or it might be just a segment of it that we drop into an e-learning. And I'll talk more about that again too. Is it important to create and or design standalone digital media? And that's what I was just saying. Whiteboard videos, instructional how-tos, live action videos, animated videos that are created as complete vehicles for the critical information conveyed. And I think this is one of the most important usages of this right now as we switch, just kind of as an industry, as a business training world, really, to shorter, punchier, more entertaining content delivery. Digital media that will be used in certain places to make a static design more visually compelling. So that could just be motion graphics. We don't have to have a video and everything, of course, with the use of photos, narration, and that sometimes just putting in a little bit of narration even will really adequately convey the necessary information and just make it much more compelling. So it's really important to think about putting all this together. It's like what to do, how to do it. The crucial really details for digital media translation and project success. So even with a project plan, which includes contract details, timelines, overall scope and parameters with budget agreements in place, having buy-in and transparency among stakeholders and production teams are essential to a successful outcome. Since we're all collaborating with other human beings, the pitfalls can be many. Who hasn't been blindsided by personalities, differing communication styles, language barriers, time zones, and other underlying stressors? After several experiences managing clients' international teams as well as their domestic teams, the following takeaways have really guided and assured successful management planning. And, may I say again, less headaches for all concerned. So here we are. Here we have some hard-boiled evidence. And what I completely suggest, involve your senior management from the beginning. We have to start from the top on this. Senior management might need to sign off on any training initiative, so ensure they are involved and accountable for feedback early in the process. The success of any ROI-based training project is based on attainable results. Ensure you have the complete support of upper management as well as your clients and your team members. Identify available SME reviewers, as I touched on earlier, before kicking off the project. Timely review cycles are extremely important. Usually the SME or the stakeholders designated to review the content and the production progress, so the materials, take this role on while they're keeping an assortment of other projects flowing. To support their role as reviewers, we create a manageable and clearly stated review cycle outline to make it easy for client teams to assess where their projects are in the production continuum. These project roadmaps keep deliverables on track and on budget. Transparency. Oh, this is a big one. I can't talk more about this one. I can't say enough about it. As service providers, we don't need to know every detail of the client's internal process or company culture, yet transparent expectations and honest communication directly drive the success of the project. And it's so important to have that feeling of trust. Oftentimes we're collaborating with each other and it may be the first time we're talking. We might not even talk. It might be all email. So that trust and that transparency is vital to keeping things going and to saving money on both sides. Approvals of all script content, this is the cardinal rule, must be approved and signed off on. Any project that involves audio, translation, digital media, and of course, prior to e-learning development, we've got to have that signed off. This goes hand in hand with having senior management involved and also invested in the process. If approvals are not aligned from the top down, costly change management, does result. And the adherence to the best practices and contract agreements. The best practices have come from mistakes and also successes. And really, when we offer them to clients prior to starting everything off, it's really just to support them. It's not about trying to impose any other kind of rules. And I wrote here, and this is so true, battle tested. They are battle tested. They're the basis for the best practices. They guide the process. They assure the timeline flow and adhering to the budget. One of the main agreements is no changes once a script or content is sent to the digital media teams. And now, of course, things are not perfect, so sometimes that does happen. But we're trying to talk about ROI here. We're trying to discuss how we measure that, how we manage that. And so that's why I'm putting it in these terms. In an ideal world, there are no changes. But if you want to stick to your ROI, you've got to really be clear about before passing them on to your production teams. So I'm just going to share a few examples of things that worked and what didn't. And please feel free. I hope people are writing any questions they might have, soon for us, because I'm only I'm just able to touch on these, but I'm happy to talk about anything that someone might need more detail on. So this problem was not having a clear point person. If you don't have it on both sides, it's counterproductive for sure. During a training video project, a client had several team members sending the emails. Usually they crossed each other, and often with corrections, edits, and content changes that directly contradicted what other team members had recently instructed our team to do. And of course, this resulted in the timeline blowing up, long weekends for my poor production team, and several cost overages. There was just no way around that. A simple solution to that would have been choose a lead person, someone who has managerial deciding power. Client teams can not only make it easier on themselves, but on their provider, assuring a successful outcome. One voice and one goal is the way to go. So another pitfall is the disregard of best practices. The tried and true guidelines that we share at the kickoff of every new project, a client manager was not transparent with me about the fact that the English scripts, which I had sent to my translation team 1 week prior, and were now going through our rigorous 3-stage process, were in fact not approved by the legal department after all. This created a maelstrom of reworking, version and change management, tracking, and fees, and the hard feelings on the part of the client's own in-country reviewers, having to do 2 times the work. And when I say hard feelings, they weren't mad at me. So it was really kind of a tough internal struggle for them as well. You have no idea when people make a sentence change what that does in a translation, in the hierarchy of rework that we have to do. It's just absolutely amazing. It seems like it wouldn't be a big deal, but it is quite a big deal, because we have to be very clear, especially with procedural, or legal compliance work. We have to be completely clear. Every word has to be right. So the solution was, I had another client engage with me at the onset to enlist my support to go through the course materials together. We were able to identify some major typos and other needed fixes for the source deck before sending the scripts to my teams. This just completely prevented bottlenecks and headaches for all of us. And the few extra days that it took were actually money in the bank for the client and priceless goodwill from me and my providers. All right. So it doesn't have to break the bank to deliver training in an impactful and entertaining way. The great part about using digital media as a centerpiece of trainings is that each piece can be thought of as a component of the big picture. As I was saying earlier, that I'm going to dive into a little bit more here, as we're talking about, we'll take whiteboards again, whiteboard videos as the example. They can be used as a clickable link within the training to deliver more critical content as needed by the learner. So say we have new hires and we have experts having to take the same training for some reason, some compliance reason. Well, the new hire is definitely going to need more immediate support around learning just maybe basic company culture points or something to that effect. So that way they can view the same e-learning and each can get the information they need. The new hire can click on the link, go and just watch the 2 or 3 minute video, and then come back to the e-learning and they've gotten all the information they need. It's really a great way. And also, of course, we're repurposing, because we could take that link now, we can take that video that's attached to that link and move it into perhaps, a different training when that has to be updated. So we get to save on that spend there. Deliver the video and digital media as segments available on mobile devices to support sales teams in the field. Well, like, what's better than that? Your product specialists are going out to meet with a client. Perhaps they're new hires, they're just learning, and they can just go bing on their mobile device, get that little hit, go, yes, that's right, I remember, and go in there feeling more confident. Digital media can also be used to revamp trainings. With an eye to the future, we can create certain segments based on information that won't change. As I said just now, such as company culture information, real basic how-tos, standard company product offerings that we know are not going to change. They're gold standards. Those things are perfect for just doing a segment of digital media and keeping that. The development time for trainings are shorter, and based in digital media, it's greatly reduced as compared to traditional e-learnings. When given a final script, we can usually turn around a completed 2 to 3 minute whiteboard video in as little as a few weeks. This is such a boon given the pace of business and the need for fast, efficient onboarding of new talent. Engaging with creative content is just the best way to assure the main goal of keeping our talent happy and keeping them working with us, as Alan was saying earlier. So my contact information will be at the end of the webinar. And again, please type any questions in that you may have in the box, and we'll have a Q&A on the end. And now I'm going to pass it back to Alan, who'll share about how to create and manage reliable ROI-based training technology. Alan.
All right, Sissy, great job. So in these next two pieces, as we close this webinar, we're really going to discuss what the options are for implementing these pieces of video, whether it be through an e-learning or a mobile app or something like that. And I'll give you some ideas on some things maybe you thought about, and then some things that maybe you haven't thought about that could be a cost saver for your clients. Okay, so when we think about that, we're referring to technologies that they're modern for the most part. They're flexible on a number of formats and for a number of different business types, and they're also trackable via multiple methods. And a few of those methods we've talked about with LMS systems and e-learnings and things like that. Those things have been around for years. There's much more that we can do. Social media, and there's things online with website tracking now that third-party businesses offer that are very, very cheap and cost-effective. Twitter and Facebook come with their own analytics now. So there's some things there we can leverage and save cost as well in the workplace. So one thing I would say is to take the time and become extremely familiar with the functionality requirements for the project. Talk to your clients, not only the requirements in-house within their business, but what they're asking for. Is it even feasible? Can it be done? And certainly can it be done within their project budget is one of the things I like to think of. So one of the first things that we can look at as far as reliable training, it's something that we've all been in touch with over the last 10 to 15 years, is certainly interactive e-learning, like we've mentioned. And I like to think of it above and beyond LMS, not necessarily hosted somewhere, very flexible, not tied down to an LMS system or a certain type of e-learning software such as Lectora or Storyline, right? If the client, maybe they don't have a budget for that, or they don't have a copy of that software. So one thing I do, and it's helped me extensively with Walmart and with very cost-conscious clients, is to harness HTML, HTML5, JavaScript, and other code formats that are used for web. Basically, Captivate, Lectora, and Storyline are web-based softwares. The code, the PHP, and the things that build those exported files are all web-based. So we are not confined to using those softwares. We can definitely add bells and whistles with HTML and JavaScript inside the e-learning or outside to drive them to other pages within a server, within a website, within a business to pull a job aid or things like that. And I've kind of listed below a few of the things that you can pull outside of e-learnings that maybe you haven't thought of. Maybe you thought that they could be within an e-learning, but not necessarily outside of an e-learning. So, pages and forms, any type of downloadable file, such as a DOCX or PowerPoint or something like that, if it's a training aid. Great way to give assets to a facilitator if they need a touch base or somewhere to go to download their facilitator pack or their assets for their class. Interactive games can also be included. Doesn't have to be done necessarily within Captivate or within Storyline. Like I said, all that is web-based. We can certainly create something that's modular that can be used within that piece or outside of that e-learning software as well, in more of a web-based setting. Simplify those things. We don't have to cut down on functionality or tracking by simplifying the piece. There's other things out there that are extremely reliable, and I'm going to dive into some of those in these next few chapters. So these additions can include multiple areas of the company. Even they don't have to be within the same department. Via that Captivate or that Storyline file, we can certainly jump around and make sure the training is built correctly for the training. It's not built for a specific team. It's flexible. Like I said, and to Sissy's point, with ROI, having those assets to reuse is extremely important. Certainly with larger companies that are cost conscious. So one of the things that I've had some great success with lately, as far as giving companies a cheap trigger to fire off an access training, is QR codes. You guys have probably seen those, for the last several years at restaurants, as product promotions, as giveaways, things like that, sweepstakes. They're cheap to make, cheap to use, very upgradable, easy to manage. And it's a great way to trigger these things, whether it be a whiteboard video, or it could be, like to Sissy's point, it could be a series of short supporting pieces, right, for VO or for translation. You can include QRs as vinyl stickers. It could be on a vehicle. It could be on a poster, a steel within a modular, within a brick and mortar store, something along those lines. Any kind of scannable tag. It could be on a website. It could be on a hang tag, like an apparel hang tag. Things like that. Think outside of the box a little bit, because we're very open with QR. It's been around for a while. It's proven. And like I said, it's a cheap alternative to fire off some of these interactives without having to go full-blown and build e-learnings, which can get very expensive sometimes. So yeah, as I discussed, a few of the QR training options that we can kind of think of that I've used recently that have been very, very successful for companies is that you can track users of all the QR stickers. You can actually set up QR management programs. QR stickers can be built with URLs embedded, of course, but did you know that you can actually update that URL after the QR is created at any time? And that's done by actually bouncing that URL link off of a server or a management page that we have built or set up with you. And you can, on the back side, then go and add a new URL after that QR sticker has been placed in the field at any time. So you would never have to reprint that sticker, backtrack and replace stickers, anything like that. You can always change that on the front end. Makes it really, really handy. Great for large-scale rollouts, okay, to access some of these videos and these interactives. QRs don't have to be plain black and white anymore. They can be artistic images. They can be logos that are embedded with URLs or with other things, audio files, things of that nature. You're not really tied down to a dot matrix grid pattern like we were in the past. There's lots of options out there. Some of the things that I use to create QR codes or Adobe InDesign can easily export them. Yet the QR codes that you create with InDesign they're locked down to that URL. So when you create that QR code within the InDesign, you have to keep the URL forever. There's ways to manage those where, like I said, we can bounce that URL off of a server with a redirect, and all we have to do is just change that redirect link, and that gives us a new link for the same QR code in the field. Cheap way to upgrade that. Rebates are a great way. Something that drives ROI as well in sales. Great way to get data from users through a survey on these things. Very, very valuable with your business. You can also access job aids and e-learnings on servers. Job aids such as PDFs, graphics, things like that. Maybe it's an SOP, right? Something very simple and cheap. Great way to get people to access these. With QRs, like I said, you can certainly take them to a web page with a URL. You can also add password protection to that web page, so you can actually give your employees a personalized ID or username, and they can log in to help you track them after the point. So another option here is download a training app or newsletter via a QR code, another way to really drive business. Newsletters, they can grow your business 10 to 15% a month if you do them weekly or bi-weekly. They tell us that it's better to put in less information in a shorter amount of time with newsletters. Possibly hit your subscribers every week, then every 30 days you're going to get a better response. So keep that in mind. Create a long-term management plan for the QR program, like I said. Various stickers for specific events. You can track all those. Same QR, same sticker in the field, but you can change the URL on the backside if you design a QR program. If you've got any questions on how to do that, certainly reach out to me, and I can answer any questions that you might have at a later date. And one thing that I've suggested for companies that really didn't have a whole lot of budget to get started. They knew they needed these things. They're cutting edge. They love the ideas, but they didn't have the budget. Well, you can sell that QR real estate. Partner with another business. Partner with a charity. Something to get some momentum and some foothold for your business specifically. So be creative on that, and don't tie yourself down to being alone. Be open to partner with other people too to gain leverage. And like I said, you can always use that to promote a charitable organization. With Walmart, Susan G. Komen, and the Arkansas Children's Hospital is very, very, it's a big part of that. They donate to those guys literally every month, if not every week. QR is a great way to send people to their website, get them traffic, grow their business, and at the same time possibly grow yours by using link trade outs, or affiliate marketing. And we'll move on. Okay, and another thing, and I've had some great success with this as well, when companies haven't necessarily had the budget to build full-blown e-learnings. Interactive PDFs are a great way to do that. They don't have to be a form. They can be creative in nature. They can collect surveys and things like that, and really do some stuff that typically, 10 years ago PDFs couldn't do. So if you would, I would definitely suggest deep diving into Acrobat and reading up some of the new features that they've added over the last couple of years, and see if that's something you can use. Obviously, Acrobat Pro or Adobe InDesign you can use to build these interactive PDFs. I prefer Acrobat Pro. It's a little bit easier to use, and it's cheaper than using InDesign. Some of the functionality does differ, so I would look into that if you have an interest in these pieces. They're very reliable in a web-based setting, such as an LMS or a third party or a website. Like I said, anytime you've got to drive somebody to a URL or a video, if that video is housed anywhere, PDFs are a great way to get them there, and to manage them while they're there. You can embed videos and PDFs, audio, anything you need. So like I said, if a business doesn't necessarily have the budget for a full-blown 20-minute e-learning, this may be a good option for them. And like I said, be extremely knowledgeable of functionality requirements. PDFs can do a lot, but they can't do everything. So, make sure that you evaluate that first. If you have any questions, reach out to somebody that's knowledgeable like me or like Sissy. Certainly we're happy to help. So in our last chapter, before we wrap up, we've got a few minutes left here. This is really how to get the most out of your project. And a few things to keep in mind that will help you with evaluation and to grow your relationship with your clients as you go, okay, with follow-up and after you discuss milestones, improvements. There's always going to be improvements, no matter how good you do on the project and how successful it is. Always thank them for their time and their partnership, and for choosing you. There's a lot of competition out there. You need to keep that in mind. Always do that. Ask them if they reach their ROI target. In the beginning, you should have certainly sat down with them and helped them identify an attainable target, kind of based on what we've talked about. So, if so, what were their biggest successes if they reached their target? Or, were these part of the original scope and ROI targets, or were they outside of that? Were they key learnings that were positive things that came in after the fact, which would be a good thing, but we need to know that. What were some of the other successes that weren't included in the original scope? So keep those things in mind. If you didn't hit your target, why not? What were some of the reasons? Was the initial scope too high, possibly? Could be. If it's the first time you've worked with that client, that can certainly happen, okay? And if the ROI target was attainable but missed, why was it missed? What were some of the reasons that happened, right? Always ask those questions and dive down and find out why. How can the expectations or targets be adjusted in the future to increase ROI? Even if you did hit your targets, what's the limit? Sky's the limit. There's always going to be a limit. Pick something that's attainable and pick a goal that you can certainly hit. And most importantly, another thing Sissy touched on was involving leadership in the beginning, the middle, and the end. It's really important. They're going to be the one paying your bills for these projects, so it's super important to get their feedback and to keep them involved. And what was their level of engagement? Keep that in mind. It's certainly nice to know that you got the support of your leadership teams. And then what are the future of these projects going forward? Can we use assets from this and build more projects, low-hanging fruit, as Sissy suggested, to save them ROI? Bust them up, use maybe pieces of these videos to support facilitation in classes rather than e-learning. Certainly can. And if possible, schedule another meeting to evaluate additional areas of their business. Like I said, it could be a different department that had a similar need. That's a time, if you've had a good success ratio with this group in the past, grow that business a little bit. Have them introduce you to other people within their company and grow your business as well. Support those groups. So as we kind of wrap up, there'll be a few minutes as we have left to answer some quick questions. We had a few come through. I'd love to just really thank you guys for having us today. There's been a lot of information we've covered, obviously, but we're happy to answer any questions you have after the webinar today, or certainly if you want to reach out to us directly. And you can kind of see our contact information. You can see mine as well as Sissy's. We're happy to help with your next project or if you have questions about this. So thank you. And I guess we're going to take a few minutes here at the end to answer some additional questions. So Sissy, I'll let you get started and I'll take a break for a few minutes and I'll jump back in.
Okay, thanks, Alan. So I'm watching what's going on here in the chat, and good ideas. I really appreciate Kim jumping in on that. Let's see. So you're talking about too many times operations client. Yeah, yes, changing halfway through. Yeah. So what I have to say about that is, I know for me, I mean, everybody has to do whatever they do, but I've learned to put as many parts in the agreement as I know will not just protect me, but honestly protect them. That's super important. We want to make sure everybody's getting what they want. We want our clients to be happy at the end and to hire us again, right? And to make sure they get the best possible product. So that's the whole thing about transparency. And because I find that a lot of these problems come up because folks are not telling you exactly what's going on. They're not telling you that they don't have an approval, or they're not telling you that halfway through they just know someone else is out of town, they're coming back, and there's going to be a change. So it's super, super important, to make sure we're covered by that, because we have to charge them, we have to fix it and make it right, and they need it done correctly. So I think that's really, really important. Does anybody else want to either weigh in on that or ask any other questions about what we've been putting in? Yes, I read herding cats, and we know that's true. Even in Texas, we can't herd cats. No one can. if anyone else has a question, anything specific about the digital media aspects that I brought up. Let's see. And this is for you, Alan.
Yeah, so was this the question about what to do when senior management doesn't honor the original agreement and no negotiation is available? I'll tell you, that's happened to me a number of times. And I've had to be really careful about how I phrase the initial statement of work, is what we use here at TrainingPros. I've gotten extremely specific about what was expected from us and what was expected from the client. So that way, if there ever is any pushback from leadership, it would have been from the point person that signed the SOW, and we have some discussion room there to go back and discuss the SOW together, and why we can't really do that work for free. Certainly within our SOWs, I try to always add content that allows for additional charges on down the road if those are needed. I always let the client know if I foresee those charges, if the timeline's starting to go over or it's taking too long or there's additional edits. Certainly Sissy can talk to that. It happens all the time. That's part of the creative process. Sometimes we get late feedback from other people that weren't necessarily the project owner, so it happens. It's all in how we react to that and letting the client know before the initial project begins that those charges will apply, and when and what charges might apply later on down the road. So hopefully that helps.
Hey, Alan, this is Justin. There's actually another question that had came through. If you can check in the chat there, it's in like purple text. You mentioned improved morale as a level of success. How do you track, observe, or calculate morale, I think is the question.
That's a great question. Do we have a name with that question? That may be something I can type up and get back with after this call today. We're past the 2 o'clock mark, so I may have to go and look through my notes, and I'll try to pull up a case study where I specifically helped one of my clients with a similar need in that regard, and I can give you some examples of what we did to remedy that situation.
Yep, it was Carrie Garbus, and we'll have her contact information so you can follow up with her
terrific.
After the session.
Great, thanks, Carrie.
So I think at this point we are going to wrap up. This is Justin Dedek with Harrisburg University. I want to thank both Alan and Sissy for a really wonderful and engaging presentation. And thanks to the participants. There was some good stuff going on in the chat window today. If you'll hang out for a second, I'm going to move over to a feedback slide that'll just give you an opportunity to provide us some feedback on the session today. We take the feedback seriously, so please stick around for a minute or two if you got it. And again, just thanks for joining. We'll look for you on the next webinar. So thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.